Hello, I'm Stephan Schwartz, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Schwartz Report. Today, I want to talk about something that I see increasing information about, and I don't think many people are aware of it, and it's quite grim. So I'm sorry, but try to stick with me because we need to deal with this. A recent United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioners came to the United States to look at what is being done in our prisons. And the report found that racism in the United States, a legacy of slavery, the slave trade, and 100 years of legalized apartheid that followed slavery's abolition, continues to exist today in the form of racial profiling, police killings, and many other human rights violations. The report said that Black people in America are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than whites, and 4.5 times more likely to be incarcerated. You think about that. If you're a Black person in the United States, particularly a male, and you live in a city particularly, you're constantly at risk. You're constantly having to be aware of the police, where the police are, what's going on. Even if you are as honest as any man in the city, if you do something that looks in any way like it might not be legal or criminal, you're in trouble. This report said that there were more than 1,000 killings by police each year, and that only 1% result in officers being charged. If the use of force regulations in the United States are not reformed, this is the United Nations speaking, in accordance with the international standards, aren't reformed to meet international standards. We don't meet international standards. Many of these killings will continue, the report warned. The United States, land of the free, home of the brave, has 4.4% of the world's population and 22% of the people incarcerated. We have the largest prison system, the largest number of people incarcerated in the world. When you think about prisons, you think about North Korea or Russia or China. No, the United States has the largest population of people incarcerated. This works out to be 716 men and women per 100,000 of the population. And compared to other Western democracies, the US is grotesquely out of line. To give you an example, if there's 716 per 100,000 in the United States, in Denmark, there's 73 out of 100,000. Norway, 72. Germany, 79. France, 98 out of 100,000. Biggest prison population in Europe is the United Kingdom at 348, but that's still a fraction of the United States. On March 2019, 58.5% of the people in federal prison were categorized as white, although that includes Hispanics and Latinos who are not listed separately. And I want to tell you that to put this podcast together and talk about this and get the information accurate so that I could talk about it was a real task, because there's a significant effort made to make sure that it's very hard for people to really dig this information out. So 58.5% are white, Hispanic, or Latino. 37.8 are Black. Native American Pacific Islanders are 2.3, and 1.5% are Asians. Now that's culturally very interesting. Why are so few Asians arrested and charged and convicted? Why do so few Asians seem to commit crimes? This is culture, but it's also bias. 37.8 are Black African Americans. So take a look at this chart and get a sense of how many people are locked up. State prisons, 1,306,000. Local jails, 612,000. Federal prisons and jails, 221,000. We have a form of slavery going on in addition to this huge number of people that are incarcerated and this disproportionate number of people who are killed by the police, who are usually not held accountable. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the United States in 1865, with one exception: compulsory labor in prisons. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. It read, that's the 13th Amendment quoted. Nearly 160 years later, the United States is one of only 17 countries that still impose compulsory work, according to this United Nations report, which is what got me started on this. United Nations for Human Rights and the Office of the High Commissioners. According to this report, and it just came out, Walk Free, an Australian human rights group in collaboration with the United Nations Internal Labour Organization and International Organization for Migration, did this research and did it very carefully, which is what caught my attention. But as I said, this incarcerated work, this is the new American slavery. We have slavery in the United States. Oh, it's not about owning an individual owning people. It's about the government, the state itself owning the people. We not only have the largest incarceration rate, a 22 report by the American Civil Liberties Union found that about 2/3 of prisoners in public and private institutions, or about 800,000 people, were forced to work. Nationally, prisoners are paid a pre-tax hourly average wage of 52 cents an hour. And in some states, they're not paid anything, while they produce billions of dollars in goods and services for prisons, according to the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union. Now think about that. You got 800,000 people who were housed under restraint and who were forced to work and who get a pre-tax hourly average wage of 52 cents an hour. Well, you might be able to go to the PX or whatever they call it in prison, buy some potato chips or something, but basically it's a form of slavery. And it's going on, and very, very few people talk about it. The United Nations, and this is a quote, all of these practices, including, and this one, I didn't know what to do with this one. I mean, even emotionally, including shackling pregnant women before, during, and after labor, are an affront to human dignity and the best interests of the child, the UN report states. Instruments of restraint shall never be used on women during labor, during childbirth, and immediately after childbirth in accordance with the UN Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners, also known as the Nelson Mandela Rules. And yet, we do it routinely. The delegation from the UN, the group that came over to examine what was going on in the United States, received shocking information over plantation-style prisons in southern states, in which contemporary forms of slavery are reported. Commonly known, for instance, as Angola, the Louisiana State Penitentiary occupies an 18,000-acre former slave plantation, larger than the island of Manhattan. And this plantation, just as it was before the Civil War, is worked by incarcerated labor today, the same soil, the same labor as before the Civil War. It currently houses nearly 5,000 adult men, the majority of them black, of course, forced to labor in the fields picking cotton under the watch of white freemen on horseback. It's just as it was before the Civil War. These are in conditions very similar to those of 150 years ago. The mechanism received direct testimonies, this is the committee, from Angola victims and allegations of children being transferred to this prison and held in solitary confinement and in general under appalling detention conditions. This is slavery. Louisiana still practices slavery, and so do other southern states, but it's not just in the southern states. This is a function of many American prisons, state and federal. Under international law, governments can require people to work under certain conditions. But, and this is a quote again from the United Nations, a state exceeds those limits when it compels citizens to work as punishment for expressing or acting on political views, or for the purpose of economic development by the state, or as a means of racial, ethnic, social, or religious discrimination. That's the United Nations speaking about what they saw in the United States. We need to change. We need to become a different kind of country. Our culture is profoundly distorted. We do not support well-being as a first priority. We support profit, and we still have the racism and a kind of new slavery, something that no one talks about, and I think very few people, except the people that are under those conditions, even know about. So when you go to a political meeting or you talk to somebody in politics or you read something in the paper or watch it on television or see it in social media. Make your views clear about fairness, fostering well-being, ending the new American slavery. Thank you.